Hello, Med1. Welcome to our continued coverage of events and structures occurring in the cytosol of the cell. This video is an introductory video to a subsequent 3 videos that will focus on the cytoskeleton. I am Dr. James. My contact information is here. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if any of this is unclear or just if you want to chat about it a little bit more. The reading is indicated here. There's a link directly to the chapter from your syllabus, so please do check it out. It's a fairly easy read. What is the goal of this series of videos about the cytoskeleton? Well, we want to understand, first of all, what the cytoskeleton is. It's not one thing, it's more than one thing. So we're going to talk about the components of the cytoskeleton and what those components do to make the cell, and by extension, tissues and organs function normally. Specifically, our objectives are, first of all, to differentiate these components from each other. So compare them, know how they're different in terms of where they're located, their structure, and what they do, and also the types of proteins that bind to them. Then in the second objective, we're looking at how they build up or polymerize and how they break down or depolymerize and why this is important. So let's start. First of all, you have had a class on medical terminology, so by now you know what the cytoskeleton is. Cyto, you would hopefully know, it refers to the cell. And skeleton, well, that's a familiar word. It's a framework, right? In the body, we're talking about a bony framework, whereas in the cell, we're talking about a protein filament framework, if you will. So yes, it's a network of filaments located primarily in the cytosol, but I'm going to tell you in a subsequent video about some of them that you can actually find within the nucleus. And what does this network of filaments do? Well, you can see the pictures on the right. They're actually not random, just floating around in the cell. They actually bind to things within the cell. They actually bind to our organelles, and they also provide linkages to the plasma membrane. So I mentioned the cytoskeleton isn't one thing. What is it? There are 3 main types of filaments of which the cytoskeleton is composed. Firstly, microfilaments that we commonly refer to as actin. And to give you a broad overview, some of the major functions of actin: movement of the entire cell from one physical location to another, muscle contraction, super important, maintaining the shape of cells, and also to help daughter cells separate at the end of mitosis. That's the cytokinesis. Intermediate filaments, when you think of those, think about something that helps maintain tensile strength for whatever cell type we're dealing with. And then our microtubules, well, their functions involve movement of cellular appendages. Here I've noted cilia and flagella. They're important for movement of vesicles and organelles within cells, hence we say intracellular trafficking. And they're also important in mitosis for a different purpose from microfilaments, here for spindle formation. So on the right, you can see the microfilaments, as I mentioned, in red. Our microtubules are what is shown in green in the picture above, and in blue, we're seeing the DNA in the nucleus that is staying there. And the picture below also gives you another indication of how these things are arranged in general within the cell. So at this point, you may be wondering, okay, sure, but why do I need to know this as a medical student? I'm going to tell you about a few of the reasons. One of them is physiological. So I mentioned microfilaments, muscle contraction, super important. Help the body to move, help our heart to contract, help with the digestion process and other processes within the body. So from a physiology standpoint, you need this foundation about the cytoskeleton. And then let's look more clinically. When you dig into that textbook, which I know you will right away after this, you're going to see some boxes that are labeled clinical application. And one of them is going to talk about muscular dystrophies. Well, we're going to touch on that. A component of the cytoskeleton, one of the binding proteins, is implicated significantly as a cause of things like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, which you may or may not have heard of before. Normal embryonic development. We need to know about the role of the cytoskeleton in normal embryonic development and know that if our neurons, our nerve cells, as they form, if they can't migrate toward certain regions of the brain, well, there are implications for this in conditions such as epilepsy and other types of disorders. And let me tell you about one other one. A lot of you have heard of Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS. The proper name for it is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which you don't need to know about at the moment, so don't worry about scribbling that down. But mutations to some proteins that interact with the cytoskeleton basically lead to that disease. So I've mentioned these individually. The subsequent 3 videos will go through them individually, but note that all 3 of these types of filaments have to interact with each other for the cell to function normally. So as you progress through those subsequent 3 videos, we're going to touch on these different correlations that I mentioned, and you're going to continue to build on this foundation to learn more about these correlations later in this semester and in subsequent semesters. So see you soon in video 2.